Hello folks, I hope you're having a good day today. Hey, today I want to take a look at the next story in my sort of October, where I'm kind of dedicating it to the Cthulhu Mythos and H.P. Lovecraft. And what I'm going to be doing is taking a look at one of his revisions. This revision is in this published story. It's called Winged Death. It's by himself and Hazel Heald. And so forth. I want to take a look at two stories that are set in sub-Saharan Africa. I think it's an area that doesn't have a whole lot of mythosing. There's not as many stories that are written there by Lovecraft and some of his cadre, and so forth. So I think it's a lost opportunity. But himself, Hazel Heald, will write a revision there. It's incredibly well done, and so forth. So we'll take a look at it, called Winged Death. And then we'll also take a look next story, The Treatment of Zimbabwe by Donald Wandrei, who's also a Generation 1 author writing at the same time as Lovecraft. Which I think is an incredibly strong story. In fact, it's probably one of my top 10. Probably in the back half, but one of my top 10 probably Cthulhu Mythos stories. And I think it's so strong. So we'll take a look at it and why I like it so much. And so again, we'll start with Winged Death. This is probably one of my favorite mythos revisions that Lovecraft does with somebody else. Whether the word revision is correct or not, whether it's co-writing or ghost writing or... I mean, he did a bunch of them. I think it's more than 15 or 20 of them, and so forth. And so, who knows? Sometimes we know in like letters and writing, but sometimes, we just don't always know with a lot of these stories and so forth. So I'm just going to toss this out there. I think it's well done though, and incredibly well crafted. So basically, it's going to have, and so I'll give you basically what's going to happen with it in a moment, and so forth, and we'll kind of take a look at doing a review thereof. I do think it's important, though, to do a lot of these sort of Cthulhu Mythos stories sort of together, because they're all the shared universe with all these tons and tons of writers, big names, Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, like modern days, going all the way back to a Robert Bloch who wrote Psycho and lots of other novels, to H.P. Lovecraft, the guy who wrote Conan, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, people who are in the like Fritz Lieber or C.L. Moore, who are both in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Abraham Merritt, and so forth. There are so many people out there that are big names in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, all the way through to today, and so forth. There are some of the biggest names that are out there, and people who've won Hugos, people who've won Stoker Awards, and so forth, for their works in these fields, and so forth. Some of the best writers today, like Ramsey Campbell, who's basically the Stephen King of the UK right now, and has been for the last few decades, has written very heavily in it, has been very heavily influenced by Lovecraft, and so understanding these people and so forth, and the shared universe they all wrote in, that's, I think, something really great. So that's what we're taking a look at as part of this October. I'm calling it Cthulhu October. As a part of this, I'm doing sort of an accelerated timeline where I look at multiple stories very quickly back to back to back to back to back for you, because I want to get done. I'm going to knock out so many stories. It's so much fun time. So now I take a look at Winged Death. Winged Death is really cool, because basically it's much more of a psychological horror story. It does have and it has some really fun elements. So basically we're going to start off, and our first scene is going to tell us what happens. This is not uncommon for a horror story where on the first page it's going to tell us what ends up happening. Because of this, I'm actually going to give you the full synopsis overall, rather than stopping like halfway through or something like that, when I'm telling you what's happening in the story. But basically what's going to end up happening is that we open up in a hotel in South Africa, and there's basically going to be these few people in this hotel room. A person just recently died of fright, and we're going to find out that there are inkwell, some weird things, a dead insect, and some other things in here, and a few people are putting together a mystery, and they see a diary that was written, a journal, so they start to open up the journal that was written by the deceased, and they start to review it. This was written by a person who was once a famous doctor, who was working over in Africa, Dr. Schlauenweit, and this doctor was disgraced by one of his co-workers, Dr. Moore, and both of them were basically working for the same person at the same time, and basically they're kind of apprentices in college and so forth. And this person, before he died, that Drs. Moore and Schlauenweit both were kind of clerking for, I guess you would call it. And so while they were working for them as sort of, grads and apprentices and so forth in the field, that person had come up with some ideas, the basic sort of ideas and outlines of some ways to push the field forward that they both were experts in, which is kind of bugs and stuff like that. And he hadn't published them or really had a chance to really push forward with them or research. Dr. Schlauenweit did. He publishes them and become very popular, had a big name in the field, so forth. He was promised a knighthood, lots of money, respect, and so forth. But before it all came out, Dr. Moore published that it was actually initially his own, their person's main stuff and some of the papers and so forth, and embarrassed him and turned him in sort of a disgrace in sort of the medical community. So he's now in Uganda, and he has set up a shop in Uganda where he helps out local people. One local people shows up, and he has this unusually ugly and nasty bug bite with a purple circular remark by it. The locals say he was bitten by something they call the devil fly, which is not something he knows anything about at the time. He has to do some research on it and so forth. But basically, he basically hears a lot about the locals. Have a local story that says that if the devil fly bites you, then when you die, you get sucked into it sucks out your soul, and then you'll be sent into the devil fly afterwards. After you die, your soul will pop out and so forth. Well, anyway, he gives some medicine to this local person, and the local person is healed after receiving the appropriate level of medicine and so forth from Dr. Schlauenweit. And he actually, in gratitude, he will agree to show him where the devil flies are and so forth. So they'll set up on an expedition with some local people to show him where the devil flies are so he can grab some for study. Because he now knows how he can kill Dr. Moore. He's going to kill him with this fly and so forth. So they go out there, they find the flies and so forth. On their expedition, they're going to pass a set of ruins in Zimbabwe that are kind of referred to as the place of the fishers of the outside, that are kind of one of the local places where the followers for Cthulhu and Cthagua meet. That's it. That's the only Cthulhu mythos, and have inspired and are seen in the devil flies. And that's it. There's like a little paragraph, and that's the only Cthulhu mythos element that's in the entire story. And then they're going to capture some devil flies. He brings them in with some tainted meat and so forth. He's going to start to bring them up. Now, he does some research and seems that devil flies are probably more well known than he thinks. So it looks like it's something that Dr. Moore would know and recognize. He would recognize these and know that they're poisonous. So what he does instead is he tries to crossbreed them with some tsetse flies that are local in order to come up with a fly variant that's new, that's been crossbred, and has all the lethality of a devil fly, but is not able to be noticed. And after doing it somewhat in some dark ways, he'll do it, and so forth. And he'll follow it down, and he'll have himself a fly variant of the original devil fly, and he'll actually use some dye to change its color, change its wings to blue, to disguise it more fully. Then he'll go out, he'll grow a beard, change his clothes, so forth, show up at a local thing, send out a few of these flies, and say, hey, here's what I found. These things are great. I don't know what they are. It's a mystery fly. I haven't been able to figure them out and so forth. And he sends them off to Dr. Moore. With the hope that Dr. Moore will take the bait, and he does, and so forth, and he will take the bait. He'll start exploring the flies, not realizing that they're super lethal, and of course, boom, he'll die after getting bitten from them. Now, it's not an immediate death. He starts to get more and more sick, and then he'll die shortly thereafter. After he dies, Dr. Schlauenweit will start to be suspected of potentially being involved with it, even though he wasn't anywhere nearby, and so forth, because of their sort of disrespect they had for it. And seeing foul play was likely the cause, although not necessarily for the fly and so forth. So he starts to flee, takes on some new identities and so forth, and will move from his home camp in kind of Uganda to some other places, and to nearby South Africa and so forth. As he does so, he is being chased by basically one of the devil flies, one of the ones that he sent out, the blue one, and so forth, the one that he made by crossing it with the tsetse fly and adding some of that blue chemical to it and such. And he's being chased by it more and more and more, and so forth. And as he's in South Africa, the fly is chasing him, and so forth. It jumps down into an ink bottle, and then jumps onto the roof, the roof of his room. Writes some things down on it, and when he sees it, our Dr. Schlauenweit will die in horror, and so forth. And then the fly will kill itself, and then that's the end of the story. Okay, that's a cool story. I really do enjoy it. It's very much a psychological horror story set in the Cthulhu Mythos as you see the fall of somebody. And they were never a good person to begin with, which is cool. But you definitely kind of see the fall, the psychological madness of this person as they move further, as you read their journal and so forth. the idea of crossbreeding flies in order to kill somebody is such a cool idea, a narrative device, and so it's you know I do enjoy that as a narrative device and so forth. And following this person and the dark things that this person will do in order to make sure it's working and put together and so forth are also pretty cool too. And you get a chance to kind of get a feel for kind of the darker side of the mythos and so forth, because it's barely in the mythos at all. It just has a paragraph mention. It definitely has room to breathe on its own. Have the story be its own. It's such a well-paced story and a well-written story that I think you could definitely take it and put forward to the game. Now, it's also pretty interesting because I do like it it's also a good counterexample. H.P. Lovecraft is definitely somebody who has sometimes, and Call of Cthulhu is a good example, where people of other races are degenerates, like Greenland or down in New Orleans and so forth. Some of the local natives that were down there can sometimes be cast as sort of these sort of degenerate inbreds and so forth. And here, the local black people are more oftentimes brave or normal and so forth. And there aren't like any like the only evil person in this area is this white doctor from Europe. And so forth. And so I think that's pretty cool as sort of a narrative switch and so forth at the same time. So I do think it's important to point out these counter examples when they exist. And again, I think this is such well strongly written and such strongly paced. I think you could literally like make it a movie script today, film it, and you have to change very little of what happens. It's just so fun and so interesting as a fall from grace and so forth. And it tries to punish the person who killed him, does so, and then has to deal with the consequences thereof. And so I think that's a lot of fun. Anyway, feel free to check it out. I'll link it to you in the comments below. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'm happy to engage you with it further. And I'll go ahead and end the review there. But hey, if you watch this video all the way to the end and you enjoyed it, feel free to hit the subscribe button because there's so many more reviews of this to follow. I like to unpack classics from science fiction, fantasy, and horror, or ones that we have not heard of or forgotten about and never really checked out. And so forth. So this is a channel's an opportunity to do that for you, review things for you, and then you can check them out and see if that's something you want to take a look at or not. Also, hey, if you watch this video all to the end and you enjoy and you spend some time with it, I appreciate that. We all have such busy days and busy lives. So the fact you spent the last few minutes with me is something I do not take for granted. It's very humbling. So thanks again for your time.